Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you Cirque's newest collection called Delusion. The irony is not lost on me, but this is a 6-piece collection in their multi-chrome magnetic formula, so think of this as a sister release almost to their Illusion collection from a few years ago. As always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish is Delusions of Grandeur, which is described as an oxblood red jelly base with bronze to gold to green shifting shimmer. So I thought the description for this one was interesting, mainly with the shimmer, since I don't see any bronze in this one at all. If anything, I would say it's more accurate to say it goes from gold to green to aqua in very extreme angles. But that aside, this one had the typical Cirque magnetic formula where it was more on the jelly side, but the coverage wasn't too bad, especially since these have the paddle brushes. It was sheer, of course, but at least it was pretty even. So I think it did build up nicely on 2 coats where it might be passable for some people, especially with shorter nails, but I did end up doing a 3rd coat as seen here. I feel like it honestly doesn't change the coverage too much, but it definitely does deepen up the color even more. And here I have some adjusted lighting to try to show off how the shimmer shifts to aqua. I almost want to say it has this like pastel quality. But anyway, I'm going to be showing this with the velvet effect since that's how I love to wear magnetics. The easiest way that I've done this technique is by holding the magnet to the side of my nail as I paint my coat, and then I move the magnet away from my nail. Usually doing this is enough to get the required effect, but you could also move the magnet to the other side of your nail and just make sure you're covering all your bases. I think it looks super shifty and dimensional like this, especially when compared to no effect, which is seen on the right. Next up is Castle in the Sky, which is described as a deep sea teal blue with red to bronze to gold to green shifting magnetic shimmer. So obviously these are all going to have the same kind of jelly leaning formula that's really easy to apply, especially with these paddle brushes. It might not look super impressive on the first coat alone because it's a bit patchy or streaky, but doing 2 coats makes it almost fully opaque. I want to say that this one was a little bit more pigmented than the last shade, so I only stopped at 2 coats for this one, though I think you can make out some nail line, so you might need a 3rd coat. Obviously, this is all going to depend on your preference. So while I did the same velvet technique as the last polish, I feel like this one didn't velvetize as nicely for some reason. It just wasn't as plush. Then we have Pipe Dream, which is a blurple jelly base that has a green to mint to gold magnetic shimmer. So even though the colors are listed out of order, this one basically had the same exact multi-chrome shift as Delusions of Grandeur, where it's gold to green to aqua or mint, I guess. But the main difference is that this one has a much more blue-toned purple base, while the first one had a more reddish berry color. I personally think the base color in this one does read as a true purple instead of blurple, but maybe that's just me. Either way, this one again had a similar formula to the last shade where I found it opaque enough for me on 2 coats, but you might need a 3rd depending on how much coverage you want. And here it is with adjusted lighting so you can see that shift to that mint color, which I think stands out a little bit more in this one than the first shade. And also similar to the last shade, I feel like I kind of struggled velvetizing this one as well, where it just wasn't as nice. The next shade we have is Fool's Paradise, which is described as an amethyst purple with rose pink to orange to gold to green shifting shimmer. I found the formula on this one to be more similar to the first shade, Delusions of Grandeur, where it was a lot more sheer on the first coat. So personally, I would recommend building this one up in 3 coats for the best coverage. I do really love the purple base in this one though, especially paired with the pink to orange shifting shimmer. I think it's just a really pretty color combination. I normally consider amethyst purples to be a lot more blue toned. I feel like this one leans a little bit more red in my opinion. So here it is built up in 3 coats, and I feel like it looks so much better than it did on just 2 coats alone. I feel like here you can also see that shift from pink to orange, and then here you can see the shift to yellow, but it was really hard to capture the green on camera. I could see it in real life though. So since I was struggling with velvetizing the last two shades with my usual technique, I wanted to try using the horseshoe magnet with this one, which is super easy to use since you just rest your nail inside the U shape and paint as usual. I've mentioned it before, but Cirque magnetics are actually really great for the velvet effect because of their jelly base, and I feel like you can really see how strong the effect is here. While I do think my technique does work because it has worked before, I feel like the horseshoe is an easy win. Up next we have Wishful Thinking, which is a smoky gray jelly base with an aqua to blue to violet shifting shimmer. I think this one is my top favorite from the collection, which is so unheard of since I usually don't care for gray polishes, but I especially love the multi-chrome shifts in this one. It's probably in my favorite color range, and I feel like it just looks so cool against the gray. I did find this one to be a little bit more sheer though, similar to the last shade, so I did end up doing 3 coats for this one as well. I feel like on 2 coats it's still a bit patchy, so even with shorter nails I would recommend doing 3. I think the base just builds up to be more full coverage, which is what I prefer, especially when wearing cat eye effects. So since the horseshoe magnet worked so well, I decided to use it again for this shade, and I feel like at first it doesn't look super crazy, but then once you move your nail from side to side, that's where you really see how strong this effect is. I feel like it just looks so cool, and here it is with adjusted lighting so you can see the shift from aqua to purple. And rounding out the collection, we have Folie, Deux, which is a forest green jelly base that has a magenta to green to gold shifting shimmer. So again, to be a little nitpicky, the colors are listed out of order, so I would say that you actually see purple head on, then magenta, then gold and green. I don't know if that really makes much of a difference to you, but it bothers me, so I wanted to mention it. So I was actually pretty surprised by how much I liked this one. I feel like I've mentioned it before that I'm not usually a fan of pink shimmers in green bases, but I think because the base was so dark and the shimmer was purple head on and also shift to these other colors, I actually just found it a lot more interesting. Formula wise, I found that this one was also more pigmented, so I only did 2 coats, but I think you could still make out some nail lines, so you might want a 3rd, especially with the cat eye effect. So since I was hooked on this horseshoe magnet, I figured I could do a complete velvet skittle with these. So from index to pinky, I'm wearing Castle in the Sky, Fool's Paradise, Wishful Thinking, and Folie, Deux. And then I have Delusions of Grandeur and Pipe Dream both on my thumb, since again, I would say those two have the same exact shimmer. Maybe it shifts to a little bit more blue in Pipe Dream, but the main difference is their base colors, where Pipe Dream is purple and Delusions is more reddish. So as you can see under my specific desk lighting setup here, it is super shifty. I just could not stop staring at how chromatic this looked. But of course I am also going to be showing the skittle in natural lighting. I unfortunately didn't have direct sunlight, so here is just bright indirect lighting, and then I'll be showing lower lighting. I feel like the velvet effect is just so incredibly strong on these, and it's most noticeable when you're moving your fingers from side to side, but up and down is where you see more of that multi-chrome shift. So it's just really fun to be moving your fingers all over the place and seeing all the different colors. But I will say, I don't know if you noticed that I think Castle in the Sky, which is on my index finger, just has a weaker sort of magnetic effect or something. It just didn't stand out quite as much as the others did, because I feel like even in low light, the other colors still really shine. And lastly, here's a little collage of the swatches with the cat eye effect, so you can see the similarities and differences. Again, Delusions of Grandeur and Pipe Dream basically have the same kind of shimmer, and here I feel like the base looks really similar too, but they are very different in real life, where you can tell that one is red and the other is purple. And even here with the cat eye effect, I think you can see just how much weaker Castle in the Sky is compared to the rest. Now, getting into comparisons, I wanted to start by showing Delusions of Grandeur next to Paradox, which is another one of Cirque's multi-chrome magnetics. This one obviously has a totally different kind of multi-chrome shift where it's blue to magenta, but I still would say that the base colors in these two are very similar, where Paradox is just a little bit more on the purple side. Then for Castle in the Sky, I was immediately reminded of Eye of the Beholder, which again is another multi-chrome magnetic. I feel like these have a similar shimmer head on, but the bases are definitely very different. So to get a more similar base, I thought I could also compare this next to Delphinus, which I think is kind of a multi-chrome shimmer, at the very least a duochrome, but it's a lot more subtle. So obviously the shimmer doesn't compare in that one, but I would say the base is definitely the most similar, where it's like a deep teal, just not as dark as Castle in the Sky. Eye of the Beholder is more of this brick red brown kind of base color, but with a matching shimmer. So Castle in the Sky is kind of a mix of these two. I was also immediately reminded of Mooncat's Nocturne, which is one of their newest shades from the Fallen collection. That one has a pretty similar fiery, coppery kind of shimmer in this dark teal blue base, but it's not as blue as Castle in the Sky. I feel like it's a little bit more murky almost. And Nocturne also has this like coppery golden microflake going on, while Castle in the Sky only has this like additional sort of sparkle. And the multi-chrome magnetic shimmer is almost exactly the same, so they're not one-to-one dupes, but close enough. And while this one isn't a magnetic, I did also want to quickly show this next to Scorched Sorceress, which is one of their shimmer graphics, because I really thought they had the same kind of bronzy red kind of shimmer head on, but obviously the bases are totally different, so these are nowhere near dupes. Then for Pipe Dream, I wanted to show this next to Dream Within a Dream, because I thought these were going to be a lot more similar, but they are so far from being dupes. Dream Within a Dream does shift to this yellow kind of shimmer, but that's in more extreme angles, so I don't think that these two look alike at all, especially because the bases are so different. Then for Fool's Paradise, I immediately wanted to see this next to Kinetic, which isn't a multi-chrome, but it is a magnetic, but as you can see, it just kind of has this like brick reddish pink kind of color. And I also wanted to show this next to Mooncat's Fields of Lavender, which also just came out in the Fallen collection, because I thought on paper they definitely sound the most similar, having these reddish kind of shimmers in purple bases, but as you can see, they are definitely very different, where Mooncat's purple base is a lot more mauve and more cool toned. Fool's Paradise is a little bit more on the berry side, but it's not as red as Kinetic. And Fool's Paradise is the only one that has a true multi-chrome shifting magnetic shimmer. Then for Wishful Thinking, I wanted to show this next to Mooncat's This Is a Storm Warning, since I thought this was going to be a bit more similar, having this kind of blue shimmer with a gray base, but obviously they are very, very different. I wouldn't call these dupes at all. I was also immediately reminded of Monolith, which is one of Cirque's multi-chromes, so this isn't magnetic, but it does shift around, but I feel like you can definitely tell these apart, where they might look like siblings, like distant cousins, but definitely not dupes. Monolith overall has a bit more of a cooler, silvery kind of color to it, and while it does shift to aqua, it doesn't shift all the way to purple, at least not as easily as Wishful Thinking. And lastly, for Folie, Deux, I wanted to quickly show this next to ILNP's Power Surge, since it's the only other kind of green magnetic with a pinkish shimmer, but as you can see, they are definitely not dupes. I actually thought maybe Cirque's Ethel was a little bit closer, because it's a deeper green with this magenta to yellowy shifting shimmer. So while it isn't a magnetic, I feel like the color shift in the shimmer is almost exactly the same, but obviously Ethel is a lot lighter and also has hollow. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Cirque's Delusion collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release, because surprisingly, I kind of like it. I say surprisingly because if you don't know, I've talked about Cirque's magnetics before, where I usually don't like them compared to other brands, mainly because they are much more sheer and on the jelly side. Even though I do love jellies, when it comes to magnetics, I just prefer them to be a lot more opaque. And I also prefer my magnetics to have a little extra sparkle, whether it's like a little hollow flaky or just an extra shimmer. So in comparison to other brands, Cirque magnetics, I feel like usually are a little bit more on the plain side, and again, just more sheer than I usually like. But because the shimmer in this is multi-chromatic, I feel like that just makes them so much more interesting. Like, I was really having so much fun seeing the different color shifts. And like I mentioned in the intro, this collection is pretty similar to the Illusion collection, which had shades like Paradox, Mood Ring, Dream Within a Dream, all which I feel like are kind of like favorites from Cirque. They generally are really beautiful, so I can easily see these like pairing well next to those shades. Again, my favorites from this lineup are Wishful Thinking and Fool's Paradise, with maybe Folie like closely behind that, which is really surprising. But honestly, the other three I'm kind of like on the fence about, mainly because, like I mentioned in the comparison portion, Delusions of Grandeur and Pipe Dream I feel like are so similar to each other. They just have like the different colored bases, so I wish at least one of those had a more varying color shift in the multi-chrome finish just to like really set it apart. And then with Castle in the Sky, even though it was cool with that like teal base color, which I feel like I've been loving this season, that one unfortunately was the most underwhelming for me just because it didn't feel as strong or as multi-chromatic as the other polishes. So I guess technically I only really like half of the collection, but I would love to know what you think. So if you are interested in these, as a reminder, I am an affiliate with Cirque, so you can pick them up using my affiliate link in my description box. As always, a big thank you to all of you who do support me through that. But even if you don't plan on grabbing these, I would love to know your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!